Hi, I'm Becky Johnson with Sweetheart Quilt Design Company, and today we are going to do binding number 8 of our series of 8 binding videos. So this one is about curves, binding curves, and inside corners because they go hand in hand. So this is a small double wedding ring quilt, and you can see it's got lots of curves and inside corners. So we are going to, I have here a table runner. This is the Victorian table runner by Southwind Designs. It's one of my favorite table runner patterns. And on this, we have curves and inside corners. So when you do curves, you have to use a bias binding. If you put on a straight binding on a curve, then it will cup this way, or you can poke it that way, but it won't ever lay flat. So you have to use a bias binding so that you have some stretch to get around the outside of the curve. But while we're putting it on, we don't stretch it at all. Now in binding number 3, I told you how to make a bias binding. Now in that one, I was using a binding with a stripe, so there was lots of matching. This one is just a tone-on-tone fabric, so there's no matching that you have to do. It's a lot easier. So what we're going to do, these long stretches here are the longest parts of the quilt, and I want to be able to do my final seam, which we talked about in binding number 4. We talked about how to do that final seam so that you have a diagonal seam in your binding. So we're going to start here. We're going to leave a tail. And I'll start here. I like to do just a quick back stitch on it so that when I'm playing with the pieces to get that final seam in, I'm not pulling it out. Okay, then what we're going to do, and we talked about trimming in binding video number 1. We left our extra 1/8 of an inch so that our binding will be full. So I'm lined up in an 1/8 of an inch here. And then we're going to work our way around the corner. But the temptation is to just take that and stretch it around the corner. But don't do that. If you do that, your corner will cup, just like I showed you if you do a straight cut binding. So what we're going to do is we'll stitch as far as we can, and then we're going to pick up our binding and actually move it. Then we'll stitch a little further, and then so you see here, there's some excess here, but it goes nicely around the corner, but we haven't stretched it at all. And the reason we're doing that is because when you fold your binding to go around the outside, you need that stretch because this curve is bigger than where you stitched it. So you need that extra stretch in order to have it go on correctly. Then we'll work our way down here to the inside corner. And at the inside corner, you want to give it a clip. Don't clip it so that it's clipped past where you're going to stitch, but you can put a pin in. I'll move this back a little bit so you can see better, but you put a pin in so that it's as you're coming where you want to stop stitching. So as you're coming and stitching down here, you already know where to stop. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm stitching this on with just a scant 1/4 inch seam so that I have plenty to go around to the back. And I'm going to stitch it with my needle down so that as I pivot, it won't be moving. So I get as far as I can go, stitching straight. Then I'm going to turn pivot my table runner a little bit and pull this over here. Now you don't want to pull it out so much that you get a tuck, but you want to pull it over to the side. And you have to just keep working your way around. It takes a little bit of time, but the results are well worth it. Whoops. Yep. Had to make sure I didn't have a tuck in there. All right, and we're gonna come down this way and stitch until we get to that pin right there. Now what we're gonna do, we put that little clip in there so that, because we need to stretch this out so it's straight. So you have to fold your table runner or quilt so that it will lay flat, and you want to just give it a little tug just to make sure you don't have anything, a pleat in your table runner. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch straight in. And we're coming into a 90-degree corner, so I'll give you a quick review of how to do that. You want to put a pin in where you want to stop. Then we're going to rotate. And you can see on this, so we stitched it in, but we don't have any pleats. And I'll talk in a minute how to stitch that down. So as I rotate this, I'm going to put my pin in my binding. At the edge of the top, straight. Okay. And then, oh, I have to go backwards, so I'll go backwards 3 stitches. Then fold it where I put the pin in, get it ready to go straight down, and then we've got our 45-degree angle underneath there. And I've got my binding lined up, so it's that 1/8 inch out. Now we're coming into this inside corner on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead right now and put my pin in. Oops, had it bent. Put my pin in so I know where to stop. All right, then we'll do the same thing because it's that inside corner. So we're going to straighten this out. So I'll keep that straight, and I'll fold my table runner so that it's straight in line with this part. I got my binding caught in it. There we go. And then before I stitch, I like to give it the table runner top just a little bit of a tug to make sure that I don't have a tuck in there. Now we're going to work our way around this corner. So we're going to stitch as far as we can, then we'll rotate the table runner and pull the binding to the side. Pull our our binding over so we're not stretching it. All right, and then away we go. I'm going to stop here so that we can talk about stitching this down. So what you're going to do is hand stitch this on the back. So this wraps, you can see how it just flows nicely, and you can cover up your stitching on the back side. When you hand stitch a binding down, you want to put the back toward you, or the back on the bottom, and then you can just lift it up like this. So what we'll do is hand stitch it, and I talked about how to hand stitch this in binding video number 4. And you want to bring it back so that you cover up your stitching when you put it on. And you can see how nicely it works around the corners. So it's stretching here, but when you get back here, it's flat. And it just fits around that corner so you can do your blind stitches real carefully in there and stitch that down. Now, before you get to this corner, I'll put a pin in to hold this in place. Weave it back in so I don't poke myself. So before you get to this corner, you want to make this pleat. So you can see there's a lot extra in there. So you pleat that like that, and then you bring it around to the back, and that pleat opens up so it's flat on the back here. Let me do this over just a little further because it kind of had a double pleat in there. There we go, that's better. So you can see how it lays flat on the back side here, but you've got a pleat. So it's very important, just like you stitch down the binding on these 90-degree corners, it's very important that you stitch down the binding on these inside corners and stitch that pleat closed. So you just do like little 1/8 inch stitches clear to the front and then poke through the back to the back, and then you can work your way down the binding. So you see how that works? And I've got on this double wedding ring, you can see how I've stitched down those inside corners. If you don't stitch them down, they'll separate, and you won't be able to get them to lay back the way they're supposed to, because you can't lift it up and pick it up like you can before it's stitched. So you want to make sure you stitch those so they stay in place. And that's how you do it. So thanks a bunch.